And again, I'm just going to kind of run through the agenda and just add. So broadly, what we're going to have today is the year in review. So we're going to have some reflections from Chief Exec Neil. We're also going to have the summary of the annual report and accounts for 22-23. That's Chris Sands. We've also got the auditor's report for 22-23, and that'll be Andrew Carzosa, who will join us remotely. We've also got an overview of the work of the governors during the last year, which would have been presented by Fiona, but she unfortunately can't be here. And we have Nicola Sherwood, who's going to do that in her stead. And then we will have some reflections from myself, and we will have questions from members and from the public at the end. Okay. Okay, and I've got a couple of apologies today, formal apologies from Councillor Sarah Hill, and also an apology from Becky White. And now just moving on to the agenda, I'd like to invite Neil to the lectern to just provide us with an overview of his year in review. So welcome, Neil.
Jackie. Good afternoon. It's great to be here in person, and this is what, the third year we've had 2 virtual, so it's good for us to be together. And thank you very, very much indeed for coming along. So much has happened in the last 12 months. I've decided to make notes. Hopefully I won't read them. That wouldn't be my natural style, but I might find myself having to read. I've only got 12 pages. I don't anticipate it taking more than 45 minutes. If it takes 45 minutes, then that's 35 minutes more than I've been allocated. So I've been given a 10-minute slot, and hopefully someone is going to give me a countdown. So here we go. You know, the NHS, it's been probably as challenging as I can ever remember it nationally. There have been all sorts of issues. We'll need to talk about some of them. But the reality is, whatever we've seen on a national stage through the NHS, through social care, we've equally seen in the MPFT scenario. And I'll make reference on several occasions, but I want to say a significant thank you to each and every member of staff. We've experienced turbulence, we've experienced difficulties, we've experienced challenge. And I suppose the anxiety for someone that does the job I do is if staff allow those challenges to negatively impact them, then without a shadow of a doubt, it negatively impacts on service user and patient care. And one of the things I can say with confidence, without just having to be respectful or polite, I am in awe of the work our staff have done over the last 12 months to make sure that everyone gets the best experience. The demands on the NHS have been significant. You know that through the news. There are unprecedented numbers of people waiting to be seen, both in physical healthcare and mental health care services. We probably have our longest waits in child and adolescent mental health services. And within the child and adolescent portfolio, autism is a real issue at the moment. Some of our waiting lists are unacceptable, and it's more work we need to do. But again, both the teams I have the privilege of working with in Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, as well as Staffordshire, have gone many, many extra miles. That's been impeded in some ways by the difficulty in recruiting staff. That's been a national issue within the NHS, the ability to recruit and to retain staff. That said, I would want to acknowledge that our staffing numbers now are as good as they have been for the last 3-4 years. We are now recruiting, whether that be allied health professions, whether that be nursing staff, whether that be admin, ancillary staff, medical staff or consultants. Our recruitment and retention is looking as good as it's looked in a long time. But what we have to do is not to be content with the status quo. We've got to challenge the way we do things around here. That's a real challenge for staff. People become very comfortable doing what they've always done and how they've always done it. But we know there are more effective ways, there are more efficient ways, and we are finding those ways now. But that comes creating anxiety within our workforce who are being asked to work in different ways. My job, our collective job, is to support one another. MPFT's mission is to make life better for our communities. We aim to make everyone matter, to empower and engage our workforce to be an effective partner. Partnering has become more fundamental in the NHS. I was taught and brought up in a culture of look after your own, defend your own boundaries, support people if you've got the time, but fundamentally, we've got to do what we've got to do at home. That mentality is long gone. Unless we are partnering now with the third sector, with social care, with education, with housing, with leisure, with health, we've got nothing. And I think we need to be very clear that that's what we're asking our workforce to do as well, to work across multidisciplinary, multi-agency boundaries. And a challenge for me, certainly, do I truly understand what Stoke City Council are doing in the name of children? Am I working with the team here to ensure that our priorities are aligned to their priorities, so we're supporting families? Because the reality is often it's the child that is the byproduct of what we're dealing with: addiction, gambling, lack of funding. And these are all issues where this organisation has a significant role in working together. But I am confident, and I see evidence every day, I don't have to invent it or gild the lily, of where leaders, managers, staff are going the extra mile to partner. And if you have the time to look at some of the 36 stands out there, you will see evidence day in, day out of where our staff are working in support of other organisations or leading aspects of care, because what we're really interested in is that holistic approach. And what MPFT has to do is to occupy the space in the middle. We are often the glue between primary care and secondary care. But yet we know we have far more people going into hospital unnecessarily. The over 75s from care homes, often they don't need to go into hospital. Often the last place they need to be is in a hospital. But when someone gets into hospital, we want to do the best by them. So sometimes they stay in hospital a lot longer than they need to, and they decondition. So there are obvious areas for change where we need to challenge our own practice. But again, I want to acknowledge the passion of which significant numbers of our staff challenge the status quo and are going many, many extra miles to do things differently. Come on, you're late. Hurry up, please. Yeah, you're very welcome. Come on, Pauline, take a seat. Come on now. Therefore, it was a source of great disappointment to me that when the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, the regulator of what we do, came in October, November of last year, they reviewed our adults of working age wards, both in Shropshire and here in Staffordshire. They also looked at our intensive care unit, and they rated the service as inadequate, having been good before their inspection. That personally was a kick in the teeth for me, but I think staff that had been going many extra miles really had to come to terms with that, and they had to understand why. Liz Lockett and her team, our chief nurse, has done much work to work with the Care Quality Commission to develop a different relationship with them. They came in again in June which was not an inspection to re-rate, but they came again June just gone, and they reviewed the must-dos, and we were seen to be compliant in all of those areas. But in the 6 months in between, that was a major distraction for our staff. It gave us the opportunity to review where we were at. I hope we will see those services reviewed in the near future when the CQC are able to come back. I hope we will become good again. I want to say publicly, I don't think those services, and I'd like to think I understand those services, I don't think those services are inadequate at all. I think there's work we had to do, but they were certainly not inadequate. So I did take enormous satisfaction from how staff challenged themselves and looked to see how we could improve. 22-23 was also a year and we had to hold the mirror up to ourselves and reflect. That's what any good board would do. It's what any good organisation would do. And we decided, although we had some good governance, did we have the governance fit for the future and governance we could be proud of? Governance that would keep our service users, patients, carers, staff safe. And we invited in the Good Governance Institute to undertake an assessment of our organisation and to work with us. We're currently, through the good offices of Richard Morris, undertaking implementation programmes of those good governance recommendations to ensure the board is the best it can be. Also, during 2000, I've had 2 minutes, so I've got 2 minutes left. Thank you. Also, we need to be absolutely clear that we've seen unprecedented levels of industrial action in the NHS. Industrial action that I've never seen in my time in the NHS. I won't comment on it, but what I will say is it is the right of our staff to take appropriate industrial action. And through the BMA, a number of our staff, junior doctors, as well as consultant medical practitioners from both physical healthcare and mental health care took industrial action. But at no time did those colleagues leave patients and wards uncared for. They stepped up to the plate to ensure safety operated. There was a suggestion it could only happen as you would get care on a Christmas day. Well, we had care as it was 365 days a year. And again, I need to recognise that allied health professions, nurse prescribers, advanced nurse practitioners came in and filled the gaps to really ensure that patients got the best deal. I'm really speeding up now, Mark, I promise. So yes, we know our workforce is our best asset. That goes without saying. We need dedicated partnering amongst our staff and others. During the last year, the final year that we're reviewing of 22-23, we saw a lot of staff struggling financially, a lot of staff really not knowing how to cope. Through the work that Alex Brett and her team did through Workforce, we were able to engage with the Citizens Advice Bureau. We were able to establish a fund so staff experiencing financial hardship could draw down resources. That, to me, was an organisation going many extra miles to protect its workforce. And as a consequence of that, when we had our staff opinion survey, we were voted the highest performing staff group in the West Midlands. That just doesn't happen. There are 8,500 of us work here, and it's teams pulling together, not necessarily at my level, but at team level, supporting, helping one another, being there, not judging. And I have to recognise the significant effort that went into all of that. We continue to be an award-winning trust. Amongst other accolades we've achieved is recognition including Digital Health Awards, Health Service Journal Performance Recovery Awards, and the Parliamentary Awards, amongst others. We've been shortlisted in several categories in the upcoming Health Service Journal Awards. As many of you will know, They are our NHS Oscars. We're shortlisted in 2 categories of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. I pay tribute to Dr. Mohammed Gul, who's been shortlisted as the Psychiatric Educator of the Year, and to the Telford and Wrekin Community Mental Health Service, who've been shortlisted for the Psychiatric Team of the Year for outstanding commitment. Also, I want to recognise the sustainability and green credentialing, and we've been awarded exemplar status within the arena of sustainability. I can't finish, and I know I'm over time now, I can't finish without making some reference to research, development and innovation. Trips off the tongue of the chief executive, doesn't it? But just think about it. Research, okay, you need specialist training, and I'm such a snob, I think, to be an effective researcher, you need to be a post-doctoral. Okay, not everyone would agree with me. But innovation, development. You look out there today, and I guarantee you are going to see teams that are challenging the status quo and going the extra mile. They're doing that from within. It's not being imposed on them. And again, we need to celebrate that. We had to create a culture where we were challenging the way we did things. We were researching, we were partnering with other organisations. That resulted in February of this year, Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust being able to put a U in its title to become Midlands Partnership University Teaching Trust. Only the 2nd trust in our category to achieve that status nationally. And if you look at some of the work, let me just take an example of Professor Saeed Farouk. Saeed is doing global research now, which is bringing worldwide acclaim here. He's looking at resistive psychoses in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, and bringing the learning from here to those individuals, educating, re-educating the practitioners working in these countries. But the reality is individuals are getting a better deal. Emeritus Professor of Psychiatry, Professor Ian Brockington, of which our Brockington unit is named after, is doing tremendous international research around Europe, Eastern Europe, as well as Western Europe, talking about perinatal pregnancy-related mental health. And so we've got local research. Nationally, internationally, we've got about £50 million worth of research we're undertaking with various partners, but 8 million within our own MPFT. I need to bring to an end what has been an incredibly busy year. I hope I've given you a very balanced approach of where we didn't get things right, where we were challenged, where we've started to get things right, and where we're riding the crest of a wave. I've got no doubt that the next year is going to be more challenging than the year we're leaving. We will see increased clinical demand for services. We will most definitely see increased industrial action, and we'll have to respond to those organisationally. I just want to finish by saying I feel supported by a dedicated and ambitious executive team, which are supported by an ever incredible group of non-executive directors. And it is those individuals coming together that ensure the 8,500 of us that work here can do what we do and do it how we do it. Finally, and it is finally, some of you will be aware that we're out to advert for a new trust chair. I'd like to formally thank you, Jackie, for the significant contribution you've made as interim chair since Richard left us earlier this year. And I want to place on record my thanks to Richard during his time as chairman of the organisation. I'm sorry I've taken so much time. I've cut that down by half. I could have taken another 15 minutes, but I can see people looking at me that you can't see. So, ladies and gentlemen, members, colleagues, thank you so much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Just without further ado, I'm going to move the agenda forward to the summary of the annual accounts, annual report and accounts for 2023. And so, Chris, if you'd like to come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Good afternoon, everyone. I think, as Neil said, it's nice just to see people in a room when we're doing these type of events, and it's nice to see that nearly all the chairs have been taken. So good to see you all today. I'm just going to take you through the financial results of the trust. Neil's picked up most of the things I would have said around the annual report, so I'll focus around the finances. I think just to start, the financial climate is getting more challenging, but what we're able to present today in terms of the financial accounts is again some fantastic results. The organisation has achieved all its financial duties in 22-23, and that's not about what the board does, that's about what every team does, what the care groups are doing, what the corporate teams are doing in terms of managing those scarce resources that we have really well and using it for the best patient care that we can do. Just in terms of the presentation, just to give just an insight into some of the figures. So we've got a turnover, so the income that we get to provide services of around 620 million. That's a huge amount of resource. That's roughly around 12 million a week that we're spending, or 1.7 million pounds a day. A huge amount of resource that we're responsible for. And at year end, we made a small surplus on that, which again is one of our strategy duties to break even. We've got a strong balance sheet in the organisation, which makes it a sustainable organisation. We've got the funds that we can continue to pay for our staff. We can continue to pay for the supplies that we work with on a day-to-day basis. And we continue to invest in our estate. So last year, we spent 14.6 million on developing our estate, developing our infrastructure. We'd like to spend more in those areas, but we are limited from some of the national rules that we have. We're also responsible year on year to make efficiencies, and that's a requirement of all public sector bodies, and there are specific requirements for the NHS. But again, through the innovation that Neil talked about, through that constant review of how we're spending our money, we were able to deliver significant efficiencies last year of 12.9 million, and again, be able to deliver a good proportion of that on a recurrent, ongoing basis, which means that we don't have to make those savings again in future years. And the figures that are in the financial report, in my opinion, as Chief Financial Officer, give a true and fair view of the finances of this organisation. And Andy Cardoza from KPMG will be doing a presentation later, and they've been in and reviewed our accounts, and he'll give his view on whether they're a true and fair view of our position. We're just looking then in terms of the future financial climate. Can you just move on to the next slide, please? So looking forward into 23-24, again, Neil spoke about how things are getting more difficult. And we all know, we all read the news, don't we? We know around what's happening in terms of public sector. We know about the public sector deficit. We know around inflation. This is all bringing challenges to the NHS. So we do expect that the finances will continue to be difficult going forward, which reinforces the importance of using the resources that we've got as well as we can. I think one of the changes around the legislation and the introduction of integrated care boards and integrated care systems has really changed the relationship that an organisation like MPFT has with the regulator. So previously, where we were held to account for our individual financial position, more and more regulators are talking about system financial positions. So from a financial perspective, we sit within the Staffordshire system in terms of our reporting, but we know we also operate in Shropshire and we operate in a lot of other systems across the country, and they're all experiencing these sort of challenges, but it's more towards what's the system financial position to what the individual organisation position. So therefore we have to play our part in managing our money, but also supporting the systems in which we operate as well. I think you'll have seen from the turnover of the organisation, we continue to grow. Commissioners continue to see us as a good place to invest their resources so that we can provide services for them and develop the services that we do to get the better outcomes that we can. And we're continuing to look at what market opportunities there might be for us to expand our services further. We're also looking at where we can get national investment for capital developments. We're planning to take a final business case through the board this month around the Haywood Hospital development, which is addressing the RAC issues that we've got at that site. And that would be additional investment of circa around £27 million. So it's a really decent investment there. And just to finish off, we have a responsibility. This is public money that we spend. So we're constantly looking at how we can secure value for money and make best use of the resources that we have, but also recognise that we are accountable for the funds that we spend. And part of today is around that accountability to you as our members, but also members of the public, as well as our staff, in terms of how we spend those resources and how we spend those resources effectively. So I'll finish there. The auditors will then give a view in terms of the accounts that are being presented today, and then happy to answer any questions at the end of the session.
Great, thank you, Chris. And that leads onto the auditor report for 2023. So I'm going to invite Andrew Cardozo, who's going to join us remotely online. So there might be a couple of seconds delay before he appears. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody. And apologies that I couldn't be there with you in person. Sounds like a fantastic meeting where so many people in a room, just as Chris and the Chief Exec said, to see everybody together must be fantastic in your new facility as well. So yes, so my name's Andrew Cardozo. I'm a director here at KPMG, and I'm the responsible person for signing off the accounts, as Chris said, for the 22-23 audit. So if we just go to the next and the following page, sorry. So yeah, so this is the annual auditor's report for 22-23 for MPFT, and this is basically the summary on a page of where we got to in terms of our audit. Firstly, I'd like to thank Chris and Marianne for the fantastic work that they and their whole finance team provided us during the audit. As you'd expect from KPMG, the audit was challenging, it was robust, but it was pragmatic, and we worked really well with Marianne and Chris and the whole team in accounts to actually get the audit done to a very tight timescale that we have to work to. And equally, I'd like to thank the chair of the audit committee as well, Simon Pearce, again for being challenging, but always being willing to listen to me and my team in terms of the external audit of MPFT. So just in terms of our responsibilities, we have to look at the accounts, we have to look at the annual report that you produce, we look at the value for money arrangements that you have, and then if there's any other issues that are arising during the audit, I have to take a view whether or not I need to report that higher up within the NHS structure and higher up within government as well. On the right-hand side of the slides, you can just see the summary. So on the accounts, as Chris said earlier, I issued an unqualified, a clean opinion on your financial statements and issued that on the 26th of June 23, which was before the deadline. And again, something that is quite difficult to do in such a tight time scale that we have to work with. So we do have to have a quality set of working papers from yourselves and a first draft of accounts that is a really good first draft. And that's both things were delivered by your accounting team, which is fantastic. In terms of the annual report, we look at whether that annual report is consistent with our knowledge and experience of the trust. And again, I can confirm another big tick in that it was, and there was nothing that I needed to report back to government in terms of any differences. In terms of value for money arrangements, we go through this in a huge amount of detail now and look at three areas, which I'll come to in a minute. But again, just to say that there was nothing to report in terms of your arrangements. And finally, in terms of other reporting, I did not consider it necessary to issue any other reports in relation to MPFT, which is fantastic news from my part and for you as an organisation. If we just go to the next page, please. So this is the accounts audit. So the main risks that we identified right at the beginning of the year, there were three significant ones that we looked at. The valuation of land and buildings, because you have such a huge number in your accounts for that I have to look at that, and I bring my specialists in from KPMG in terms of our valuers, considering the valuation and the valuers work that is done on behalf of the trust. And again, there was nothing identified of a material misstatement in your accounts for that. In terms of fraudulent revenue, expenditure recognition and management override of controls, these are two significant risks that are included in every single organisation's financial plans and external audit plans, and we have to look at these. But again, the good news there is I didn't identify as part of the audit that we undertook any material misstatements related to these two risks. We just go to the next page. This is the value for money arrangements work that we do, and just as the chief exec was talking about earlier, there are certain things that we have to look at and inform our risk assessment that we carry out at the beginning of our audit. So we looked at the CQC's work, we looked at the single oversight framework ratings, we look at your governance statement, and we look at the head of internal audit opinion. As part of that, we also look through all of your governance. We look at through the MPFT that management have put together in terms of your financial plans and your looking ahead in terms of your cash flows, etc. And we came with a risk assessment. So in the middle box on the right-hand side, you can just see that for the three areas that we look at, financial sustainability, governance, and the improving economy efficiency and effectiveness, we identified one significant risk, which was right at the beginning of the audit, which was identified to be within financial sustainability. That shouldn't come as a huge surprise, given, again, as the chief exec said, and as Chris was mentioning, there are huge challenges within the NHS that you have to deal with. And we have to make sure that MPFT has the right arrangements in place. So you work not just as MPFT in one single trust, but you also now work within a system. And within that system, there are huge challenges, and those challenges can come back on MPFT because you are a system partner and you have to work within that system. So we identify that as risk, and then we continue to see how you worked as an organisation to deal with that risk. And the good news is on the far right-hand side, the final column is all green, and that's a summary of the arrangements work that we undertook. And in each of those three boxes, for each of the three areas that we looked at, you can see there was no significant weakness identified in your arrangements by my team as part of the audit of 22-23. So that's great news. So every time I've mentioned any kind of risk, I've been able to say to you that there was no issue identified at the end of our audit, which is a phenomenal place to be, given the challenges you face in an organisation within such a challenged system like the NHS. That is a great place to be. So well done. I won't take you through the rest of the slides because they're just there for information and for detail in terms of the work we did on value for money. But I'm here to take questions at the end as well after when we come to that point in the proceedings. But thank you for your time and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so just kind of moving forward so that we've got time for questions at the end. So I wanted to, this point of the agenda, look at Nicola's going to come up and just take us through an overview of the work of the governors during this year. So please come up, Nicola. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I found out I was doing this at midday. So unfortunately Fiona couldn't join us. But I've got some of Fiona's words, so I shall start with that first. So thank you to all the governors for their commitment in their roles, and governors that have now stepped down, and to the board for their engagement. Ambassador roles. So we currently have 6 in place, and all of those relationships are going from strength to strength as we move through the year. Governor resources, we've been working over the last year to create resources for the governors that we can use for communicating with members of the public or for other external organisations, and hopefully next month these will be launched. We've had 11 development sessions with the governors this year so far. More are being planned, and these sessions have been well attended and are very valued by the governors. We still continue to have our quality standard assurance visits And these are very valued assurance tools for us governors, which we always attend alongside our NEDs. And then just a bit of an overview of a reflection from me, really. So I'm in my 3rd term as a staff governor, so I'm a non-clinical staff governor. I've been privileged to have been involved in many varied changes in the organisation, from the birth of NPFT in 2018 to being part of interviews, stakeholder panels for senior appointments. And I've also been able to support new governors grow in their roles and being a buddy as well. So that's all I have to say. So thank you very much.